With the recent announcement that Star Trek Starfleet Academy will end with its second season, and with Star Trek Strange New Worlds ending after its fifth season, which we already knew, and with the only new Star Trek project of any kind known to be in development, a feature film that may or may not happen because we've been down that road a bunch of times already these last few years, it feels like maybe the Star Trek franchise might be about to enter another fallow period, which really might not be the worst thing in the world. I've been a fan of a lot of the recent stuff. I've downright loved some of it, but there's an old saying that applies here. How can we miss you if you won't go away? Star Trek has gone away a time or two in the past, only to come back with a fresh coat of paint and a new creative team and remind people why they started liking this shit in the first place, and sometimes even attracting new viewers and actually growing the audience beyond the die-hard nerds who are going to watch every minute of it even if they hate it. Seems unimaginable now, but it has been done. Not for a long-ass time, but still. The first time Star Trek staged a comeback was in 1973, 4 years after the end of the original series, when what we now call Star Trek the Animated Series premiered, but that was only a warm-up for what happened 6 years later in December 1979, when Star Trek not only returned to live action, but made its first jump from TV to the big screen. I hadn't been born yet, so I missed out on the original theatrical run of that first Star Trek movie, but my understanding is that the audience response was kind of a shrug. It opened strong, it performed well at the box office, but the studio considered it a disappointment overall, and the reception from movie critics was mixed. And having watched the movie a bunch of times, I get it. But with this being the 60th anniversary year of Star Trek, and with the franchise looking at another upcoming dark period possibly, I think this is a good opportunity to reevaluate that particular film and ask the question, is Star Trek the Motion Picture actually a good movie? Before I talk about the lukewarm reception the movie got from audiences and critics and why it might have received that reception, let me start with the movie itself. What is it about? What is the story of Star Trek the Motion Picture? As if you didn't know. Before the movie even starts, we get an overture. So, find your seat, get your popcorn and drink situation figured out, lock eyes with the stranger sitting next to you in the theater, strike up a conversation, fall in love, get married, have children, raise the children, and put them all through college. And by the time the last one graduates, it should just about be time for the movie to start. The overture is not just a classy old school Hollywood touch. It's a warning. Settle in. This is going to take a while, and we are in no hurry. Okay, there's the Paramount logo. The movie's about to start. A Gulf and Western company. Remember when Paramount was owned by a manufacturing conglomerate instead of a company founded by the evil billionaire son of an evil billionaire? The good old days. The movie actually begins, and hey, those look like Klingon ships. All right, it's been 10 years since the last time we saw live-action Klingons. I can't wait. Jesus Christ, those werewolves killed all the Klingons and stole their ships. What did you do with their bodies, you animals? Did you eat them? Did you tear their tender Klingon flesh from their bones and feed it into your demonic, misshapen faces? You murderers! Wait, those are the Klingons? That's not what Klingons look like. Everybody knows Klingons don't have bumpy foreheads and sharp teeth. They look like white people in light blackface with crepe hair mustaches. And they don't dress in whatever those costumes are supposed to be. They wear black turtlenecks and sparkly gold tank tops so they can go straight from fighting the space battle to performing in the high school show choir concert. Don't the people who made this movie know anything about Star Trek? Anyway, these Klingons are fighting a big scary space cloud. They try all the usual Klingon tactics, shooting at it, but nothing works. The big scary space cloud zaps the Klingon ships with lightning and they vanish. The crew of a Federation outpost has been observing all of this, and they notice that the big scary space cloud is heading in their direction, which also puts it on course for Earth. That's probably not great. Cut to Vulcan, where, hey, look, Spock's in his hippie phase. Little late, Spock. It's almost the 80s. Let's get some product in that hair. Spock has been studying very hard, and he's about to receive his logic medal when suddenly he's like, hold up. The priestess who is conducting the ceremony goes, oh, what? Now you don't want the logic medal? I must know your thoughts. Let me touch your face. And she touches his face, and she's like, oh, there's a consciousness calling to you from space. You don't get the logic medal. And she drops the logic medal on the ground, and everybody leaves. Now go do something about your hair, Spock. You're in a movie, man. Come on. Cut to Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco, and look who it is. Oh, yeah, there's the man. Look how ready he is to play TJ Hooker. Captain Kirk is back, only now he's Admiral Kirk, and he's on his way to meet with another admiral to convince that admiral to make him Captain Kirk again so he can command the Enterprise on its mission to intercept that big scary space cloud. On the way, Kirk runs into this guy, Commander Sonak, the new Enterprise science officer. He's like, thanks for assigning me to your crew. I'm super stoked in my emotionally detached Vulcan way. Kirk's like, yeah, no problem. I'm looking forward to serving with you for many years to come. After his off-screen meeting with the other admiral, Kirk beams up to a space station where he is greeted by Scotty, and they do a bit of expository dialogue establishing that the Enterprise's transporter is malfunctioning, and also that the prep time for launching the ship following its recently completed refit has been greatly reduced because they're in such a hurry to get out there and see about that scary space cloud. Then, Kirk and Scotty get aboard a shuttle and they fly from the space station over to where the Enterprise is docked, and this is going to take a while too, so check in with the kids, see how they're doing. Your oldest just got a job offer. It's a great opportunity, but the job is 500 miles away. You'll probably only see them on holidays, and that's if you're lucky. They've got a family of their own now. You're a grandparent. When did that happen? Seems like only yesterday your kids were babies, and now you've held their babies in your arms. The more things change, the more they stay the same. If only you could say that for your marriage, but there's no denying it. You look at your partner and the old spark just isn't there. You try to stay together, but what's the point? You still love each other, but not like you used to. As friends, you both deserve to be free, to live your lives for yourselves after all these years. You separate, they take the house, and you move into your own place. It's small, but it's all that you need. You date a little, but you don't meet anyone special. That's okay, though. You keep busy. You take up hobbies. One day, the phone rings. It's on vibrate. You're in a movie theater, and you're not a savage after all. It's okay. You won't interrupt the movie. They're still flying by the fucking ship. There's literally nothing happening. You're going to want to take that call. It's your mom. It's about your father. He was in the attic, replacing some of the insulation. Your mom always warns him about how hot it gets up there and how he shouldn't overexert himself. She noticed that he had been up there a while and she hadn't heard anything, so she went up to check on him, and I'm sorry, dear, but he's gone. We're just having a simple graveside service. You know your father. He wouldn't want a big to-do, but if you think you're up to it, maybe you could say a few words. Oh shit, they're finally aboard the Enterprise. I'm really sorry about your dad. Kirk heads to the bridge, which is a bit of a shit show because everyone's rushing to get it ready for launch, but they all stop and gather around when Kirk steps off the elevator. George Takei and Walter Koenig show off their acting chops by seeming convincingly happy to see Shatner. The old gang is thrilled that Kirk is back and in command of the Enterprise, but after Kirk leaves to go break the news to Captain Decker, who he is replacing, this weirdo is like, this isn't fair. Captain Decker has been in charge of this ship during its whole refit, and now Kirk's coming back to steal his job. And Uhura is like, who are you again? Nobody bought a ticket to see you or Captain Decker. Shut the fuck up. Kirk finds Captain Decker and says, hey, guess what? You're Commander Decker now. I'm taking over as captain. Decker's like, but why? You haven't been on the Enterprise at all during the refit. You don't know her at all. Kirk's like, of course I do. I know this ship like the back of my hand. Like this place where we are now. This is my favorite place. Main engineering? Sure, yeah. When I was a young officer, you'd never leave space dock without at least a main earring on the engine, and usually a couple of smaller ones too. That malfunctioning transporter malfunctions again, and unfortunately, people are transporting at the time. Kirk and Scotty rush into the transporter room to help, but there's nothing they can do. The people beaming up scream as their bodies are twisted and mangled, and then they vanish. And a second later, Kirk calls down to Starfleet, and the operator is like, oh yeah, they're super dead. It's gross too, wanna see? One of the people killed in the transporter was Sonak, the new science officer. Damn, and I really thought he was gonna be around for the long haul. Kirk runs into Decker in the hallway and says, hey, more good news for you. There's no time to replace Sonak, so I need you to fill in as science officer too. Gonna look great on the resume, kid. They have a big meeting on the recreation deck where Kirk briefs everybody about the big scary space cloud, and then they all watch as the cloud destroys that Federation outpost from the beginning. The new ship's navigator, Lieutenant Ilia, comes aboard. She's Deltan, which is a race of super horny people who everyone wants to fuck, just in case you were wondering how hands-on Gene Roddenberry was with the production of this film. Ilia and Decker have a history together, but there's no time for that now. The last members of the crew are beaming aboard, and there's one guy who is refusing to go. He's got this weird phobia about using the transporter, just because it killed 2 people in horrifying fashion a few minutes ago. What a baby. Kirk personally orders for that officer to be beamed aboard, and it's Dr. McCoy, looking like he has been enjoying the 70s. Sadly, his Saturday Night Fever phase has been involuntarily brought to an end because thanks to Kirk, he has been drafted back into active duty in Starfleet. He's not happy about it, but Kirk says, damn it, Bones, I need you. And McCoy's like, well, if it's like that, then okay. The crew gets ready for departure. The movie's been on for almost 40 minutes, by the way. They're just now preparing to move the ship, and soon they've left Earth behind and buzzed past Jupiter, and Kirk orders warp speed. We've dicked around for the entire first act. We gotta hurry up and intercept that space cloud. But in his haste, Kirk has forced Scotty to engage the warp engines before they'd been fully tested, and moments after reaching warp speed, the Enterprise enters an artificial wormhole that makes everything move in slow motion. And it's always at this point that I start to think the makers of this movie are just straight up fucking with us. It's been 40 minutes of nothing happening, the ship finally starts going somewhere, and it flies directly into a slow motion vortex. Anyway, this is gonna take forever. You've got a good long stretch before Chekhov even says, photon torpedoes armed. Have you thought about what you're going to say at your father's funeral? You know what you should do? Tell a story. Maybe talk about that time when you took your dog to the river and you were throwing a rubber ball into the water and the dog was swimming out and retrieving it, only the last time the dog couldn't find the ball and refused to come back without it. And finally, your dad jumped in and swam out and brought your exhausted dog safely to shore, then jumped in again and got the ball. God, he was a hell of a guy, wasn't he? How old were you then? 6? 7? Now here you are at the cemetery. Before long, you're back again, this time for your mom's service. Remember when that old lady who lived next door yelled at you for walking on her grass and your mom ran over and got in her face and told her off in front of the whole neighborhood? She was fearless. How old were you then? 10? Same age as your youngest grandchild. And my God, is it possible your oldest grandchild is graduating high school this year? Where did all the time go? It seems like your life just rushed by before you had a chance to savor it. But it's been a good life, hasn't it? A good, long life. Oh, they just blew up an asteroid, which knocked him out of the slow-mo wormhole for some reason. Better start paying attention in case something important happens in the next few weeks. Kirk yells at Decker in private for ordering Chekhov to blow up the asteroid with torpedoes instead of phasers. Decker points out that the phasers wouldn't have fired in that situation, which Kirk didn't realize because he doesn't know how the Enterprise works anymore. Kirk's like, I'm sorry, man. You've got me, right? Decker's like, I've got you, Pappy. McCoy fusses at Kirk for pushing to regain command of the Enterprise and being obsessed with this ship. Then a shuttle flies up alongside and docks, and hey, it's Spock! And he cut his hair. He looks more Spocky this way, but I kind of wish he had kept the long hippie do. Then McCoy could have made fun of him and reached out and gone like that to him, and Spock could have gone, hey, don't hit the hair. I work very hard on my hair, and you hit it. And Everyone would have laughed because it's 1979 and they all get that reference. Spock volunteers to take over as science officer, and he also helps Scotty get the Enterprise's warp engines working again so they can finally fly at warp speed without everything looking like it was directed by motherfucking Zack Snyder. Kirk and McCoy meet with Spock, and Spock explains about how he was about to get his logic medal, but then he sensed the consciousness inside the big scary space cloud, and it was that of a perfectly ordered logical mind. And Spock was like, damn, I gotta get some of that. So that's why he's here. The Enterprise reaches the scary space cloud, and the cloud fires its killer electricity, but the Enterprise's shields hold, so our heroes aren't destroyed like those loser Klingons or people on that outpost. Chekhov's hand gets fried, but who cares? The shields won't withstand another shot like that, though. Spock discovers that the cloud has been communicating with the Enterprise, but at an ultra-high frequency. Spock adjusts the computer to transmit at that frequency and sends a reply to the space cloud's message just in time to avoid taking another hit of the killer electricity. Kirk orders Sulu to take the ship inside the space cloud. Decker says, I think that's an unwarranted risk, Captain. And Kirk's like, how do you define unwarranted? Shut the fuck up. They fly into the cloud and find an enormous ship inside of it. Kirk orders Sulu to fly parallel to the gigantic ship until they get to the far end, then turn around and hold position 100 kilometers from the ship. The Enterprise begins flying above the alien ship, and this all takes for fucking ever too, but at least this time it feels like they're going somewhere. And that makes a difference. When the Enterprise reaches the end of the alien ship, it turns around and takes up a position staring right at the ship's gigantic asshole. Then a shaft of light appears on the bridge and starts scanning the computer banks. Kirk is worried that it's learning about Earth's defenses and tells Decker to turn the computer off, but he can't get it to turn off. Spock's like, one side, son, let a real man show you what to do, and he starts smashing the keyboard. The shaft of light is like, hey, fuck off, I'm trying to work here. And it zaps Spock away with some lightning. Then it turns on Ilia and zaps her, and she vanishes. The tricorder she was holding clattering to the floor. There's a moment of stunned silence. Then Decker steps up to Kirk and says, this is how I define unwarranted. Oh, come on, you were just waiting for the first thing to go wrong so you could say that. The alien ship grabs the Enterprise in a tractor beam and starts pulling it into the giant asshole. They don't have enough power to break free, so Kirk's like, just relax and let it happen. Decker says, why is it doing this? And Spock says, the same reason anyone ever puts something in their ass, Mr. Decker. Curiosity. Insatiable curiosity. Once the Enterprise is all the way in, the alien ship's asshole closes. The tractor beam turns off, and up ahead at the other side of a massive chamber is another asshole. The ship has an outer asshole and an inner asshole? These really are aliens. Only this inner asshole is shut tight. So the Enterprise is trapped? In the lower bowel? While everyone is standing around trying to figure out what to do next, an intruder alert alarm goes off. Kirk and Spock respond along with a security goon, and they find Ilia, or someone who looks like Ilia, in the shower. She's naked, so Kirk pushes the put some clothes on her button, and she steps out wearing a robe that covers her naughty bits while still showing off her sweet gams. McCoy runs in like, did I hear the naked alarm going off? While McCoy scans her with a tricorder, Ilia, speaking in a robotic voice, explains that she has been programmed by Voyager to observe the carbon units aboard the Enterprise. Kirk's like, who's Voyager? Ilia says, Voyager is that which programmed me. Were you not listening? McCoy finishes his scan and says, Jim, this isn't Ilia, it's a machine. Spock adds that this Ilia is obviously a probe sent to observe everything they do. Ilia's like, yeah, that's literally what I said like 10 seconds ago. Is everybody okay? Ilia says that Voyager's purpose is to travel to Earth and join with the Creator, but she's a little vague on who the Creator is, who or what Voyager is exactly, and what it means to join with the Creator, so they take her to sickbay so McCoy can give her a more thorough examination. While they're examining her, Decker walks in. Ilia recognizes him, calls him by name, and Kirk's like, hey, come here, and he and Spock take Decker into the hallway. Spock's like, Decker, that's not Ilia. But if not ex-girlfriend, why ex-girlfriend shaped? She looks like Ilia, but she's actually a probe sent by Voyager, the alien at the center of the big scary space cloud. The probe duplicates the real Ilia down to the smallest detail. If that includes her memories and emotions, maybe we can use that to our advantage. Decker isn't thrilled at the idea of getting close to this Ilia-shaped probe since he views it as an extension of the aliens that killed the real Ilia. But then the Ilia probe smashes through the door like the goddamn Kool-Aid Man and says, "We're done here." Kirk's like, "Commander Decker here would be happy to show you around the ship. You kids have fun now, you hear?" While he gives Ilia a tour, Decker tries to reawaken any memories or feelings of the real Ilia. It seems like it might be working, but every time the Ilia probe starts to look at Decker like she knows him and loves him, the robot part of her takes over and she gets back to business. She does let slip a few nuggets of info, though. Voyager doesn't actually know who or what the creator is. Also, once she is done with her observations of the crew aboard the Enterprise, Voyager is going to kill everybody. Spock steals a spacesuit and takes himself an unauthorized spacewalk, using the suit's thrusters to fly through that inner asshole and get a look at the next section of the alien ship. He floats past a whole bunch of stuff: galaxies, stars, individual planets, even something which Spock believes is a recreation of Voyager's home planet. Spock concludes that these images are records of Voyager's journey, and that this entire ship is Voyager, that Voyager is an enormous living machine. At the end of his float through, he sees a gigantic image of Ilia, with a glowing crystal in her neck, just like the one the Ilia probe has. Spock's like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna mind meld with it." And he does, and he screams as a rush of information floods into his brain, and he is flung backwards the way he came, all the way back through the inner asshole. By this time, it's been discovered that Spock stole that spacesuit, so Kirk is there with a spacesuit of his own, waiting on the other side of the inner asshole. Kirk catches Spock as he comes flying out and takes him back aboard the ship. After he wakes up in sickbay, Spock tells Kirk what he saw on the other side of Voyager's inner asshole. Recordings of a journey that has spanned the universe, an unimaginable amount of information. And yet, with all of that, Voyager is empty, because its cold, logical mind is unable to grasp concepts like hope and mystery and beauty. He takes Kirk's hand and says, "This simple feeling, this simple brotherly feeling between two heterosexual men is beyond Voyager's grasp. It has no answers, only questions. Questions like, is this all that I am? Is there nothing more?" The giant space cloud arrives at Earth, and Voyager sends a message via an old-fashioned radio signal. When the message isn't answered, Voyager deactivates Earth's planetary defenses, and the Ilia probe threatens to kill everyone on the planet. Kirk's like, "We know why the creator has not responded, but if you kill us, we won't tell you. We will disclose the information you want, but only in person to Voyager." Another tractor beam grabs the Enterprise and pulls it further inside the gigantic ship. As they move closer to their destination, the source of Voyager's radio transmission to Earth, Spock begins to cry. "For Voyager," he explains. "I weep for Voyager as I would for a brother. Voyager is like I was when I first came back to the Enterprise, empty, incomplete, not realizing that logic alone is not enough." Voyager wants answers to its existential questions. Why am I here? What was I meant to be? The Enterprise comes to a stop, and Chekhov reads an oxygen atmosphere forming outside. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Decker form a landing party and leave the ship along with the Ilia probe. They walk across a bridge that has formed, connecting the Enterprise to a platform, and in the center of that platform stands an old NASA Voyager probe. Ilia identifies the probe as Voyager. Kirk examines the nameplate on the side of the probe and discovers that it is Voyager VI, a probe that disappeared into a black hole 300 years ago. Kirk, Spock, and Decker piece together what must have happened. The Voyager probe emerged from the black hole on the far side of the galaxy and was found by the inhabitants of a planet of intelligent machines who repaired it and upgraded it so it could fulfill its original mission: to collect all data possible and then return the information to the creator. But Voyager VI collected so much knowledge that it became a conscious being itself. It became alive. Now it has returned to Earth to complete its mission. But in its damaged and rebuilt state, it doesn't realize that humans are its creator. When Kirk tells Voyager, "We are the creator," the Ilia probe rejects it as impossible. Kirk says, "I'll prove it. I'll help Voyager complete its mission. Only the creator can do that." The radio signal Voyager transmitted was an old NASA code. No one on Earth recognized it, which is why it went unanswered. Kirk calls the Enterprise and has Uhura look up the NASA code used to command Voyager to transmit its data. She does, and they send the code to Voyager, but the radio receiver aboard the probe burns out before the final sequence of the code arrives. "The creator must join with Voyager," Ilia says. Spock tells Kirk that Voyager must evolve in order to transcend its limitations and find answers to its questions, and evolving means joining with its creator, joining with a human, to acquire humanity's capacity to see things in terms beyond pure logic. Decker hits on the solution. "I've got it! Voyager burned out its receiver on purpose so that one of us would have to enter the final sequence manually. It wants to touch the creator." "Ooh, me, I want to do it!" McCoy says, "Decker, if you enter that code manually, you don't know what it'll do to you." And Decker's like, "Yes, I do, Doctor. I'm about to save the world and get laid with a robot that looks like my ex-girlfriend. It's every man's dream." Decker keys the final sequence into Voyager 6's computer, and he starts to sparkle and glow. And Ilia steps into the glow with him, and they disappear in brilliant flashes of light. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy make a run for it as the glow that surrounds the old Voyager probe begins to spread, and soon the entire gigantic alien ship vanishes in an explosion of light. Voyager is gone. All that remains is the Enterprise, in space above Earth. On the bridge, Kirk asks, "Did we just see the creation of a new life form?" Spock says, "Yes, we witnessed a birth, possibly a glimpse at the next step in human evolution." Like the end of 2001? Well, yeah, okay, exactly like the end of 2001. McCoy says, "It's been a long time since I delivered a baby. I hope we got this one off to a good start." Spock's like, "Thanks for weighing in, guy who did the least." Kirk tells Uhura to contact Starfleet and list Lieutenant Ilia and Captain Decker as missing. And then he takes his captain's chair and orders Sulu to take the Enterprise out for a proper shakedown cruise. When the navigator asks for a heading, Kirk says, "Out there." He waves his hand in the general direction of outer space. That-a-way. The end. So yeah, when the movie came out in 1979, it was not exactly greeted with universal acclaim. It wasn't a box office bomb by any means. I mean, they did go on to make 5 sequels to it over the next 12 years. Plus, there was the revival of Star Trek on TV in the late 80s that led to it being in continuous production in one form or another on TV and in the movies until the early 2000s. So it's not like the reception of the motion picture scared the studio away from Star Trek. But given how expensive it was, given how it had a pre-existing fan base thanks to the original TV series, and given how high the studio's hopes were due to the recent success of other high-profile sci-fi films like Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the performance of Star Trek the Motion Picture, critically, sure, but mainly commercially, was underwhelming. Speaking for myself, I've always found it pretty underwhelming too. It doesn't have the excitement of the revenge-fueled cat-and-mouse plot and the emotionally wrenching ending of Star Trek II, or the big emotional swings of the death of David and the destruction of the Enterprise, followed by the resurrection of Spock in Star Trek III, or the comedy and environmentally conscious message of Star Trek IV, or the can't-take-your-eyes-off-the-train-wreck quality of Star Trek V. And it's not the end of the Cold War allegory, political thriller, and satisfying series farewell that Star Trek VI was. Star Trek the Motion Picture, it does a lot of things right, but it also does a lot of the wrong things. Top of the things done right column, it looks great. And I don't just mean the special effects, though I like those, both the original effects and the newer ones added for the director's edition that was originally released appropriately enough, in 2001. I'll get to that in a second. The whole movie looks great. The redesign of the Enterprise itself is still maybe my favorite version of the ship, though the Disco Strange New Worlds version gives it a run for its money. The sets are outstanding. The bridge is the same basic configuration from the TV show, but sharper and cleaner and more plausible. Plausible being a relative term when you're talking about something as inherently goofy as the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. The increased budget and big screen format allow the creators of the motion picture to do something that was never possible on the TV series, and that is to impart a true feeling of size to the Enterprise. For the first time, it really feels like an enormous ship. You get that sense from some of the exteriors, like when this tiny spacesuited dork is waving goodbye to it as it lumbers out of space dock, and from the interiors as well, like this scene where the crew assembles on the recreation deck. They could never have presented a space this big on the TV show. Establishing the size of the Enterprise not only makes the ship itself feel grander and also more real, it then in turn helps to emphasize the immensity of Voyager. We know how big the Enterprise is, so when we see it looking so minuscule in these overhead shots as it's flying across the length of the ship inside the space cloud, it really gets the point across. On the other side of the page, across from the Things Done Right column, in the Wrong Things Done column, there's the pacing. The word glacial comes to mind. Some people have said the movie is too long. I've said that myself, and I'm going to say it again in a second. The movie is too long. But it's not the length that's ultimately the problem. The director's edition, which is slightly longer than the theatrical cut, runs 2 hours and 16 minutes. On paper, that's not an outrageous number. It's not ideal. As a rule, I think somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours is the best length for a movie, but there are obviously many exceptions to that rule. Star Trek the Motion Picture isn't one. But again, the problem isn't how many minutes long the movie is. The problem is how long the movie feels. I wasn't kidding in my plot summary earlier when I said it's almost 40 minutes before the Enterprise starts to leave space dock. 40 minutes, that's almost half of many movies. It's a little less than a third of this one. A little less than a third of the movie, where almost nothing of importance has happened. And I say nothing of importance because obviously stuff has happened. Incidents have occurred, though not as many as you might think. But incidents that move the story forward in meaningful ways are few and far between. We establish the threat of the big scary space cloud. We introduce our main characters, Spock, Kirk, Scotty, Decker, McCoy, and the rest. We see Commander Sonak introduced and then brutally killed off to create a hole that can be filled by Spock. That all happens in the first 40 minutes, but it's also almost all that happens in the first 40 minutes. That's a problem, both because it's really fucking boring to watch and because it undermines the alleged urgency of the situation. Over and over again, we see Kirk urging his people to work faster, to make sure the Enterprise is ready to launch as soon as possible because that deadly giant space cloud is moving closer to Earth every second and they're the only ship with any hope of stopping it. But despite how urgent Kirk says the situation is, that urgency isn't reflected in the storytelling. It doesn't seem like anyone is in that big of a hurry, despite what Kirk says. The movie itself sure as hell isn't in any hurry. It's taken its sweet-ass time with everything. So, am I supposed to be nervously biting my nails while my heroes race to intercept this rapidly approaching threat? Or am I supposed to sit back and get comfortable and just kind of let the movie come to me? It's telling me one thing and showing me another. Back over in the Things Done Right column, the story of the motion picture feels like a Star Trek story. Some of you might be quick to point out that the reason it feels like that is because it literally is a Star Trek story. The concept is very close to that of the original series episode, The Changeling, where a space probe comes aboard the Enterprise, regards the human crew as an infestation and threatens to kill them, and turns out to be an upgraded old space probe from Earth that has forgotten it was created by humans. The similarities between The Changeling and Star Trek the Motion Picture are impossible to deny, whether or not the writers, including Roddenberry himself, though he's not credited, intended them or were even aware of them. But really, for me, those similarities don't matter. It certainly doesn't affect my appreciation for the movie one way or the other to be aware that many elements of it are also found in an episode of the old show. I find the differences between the two to be far more important. Sometimes when people talk about how much alike The Changeling and the motion picture are, they make it sound as if the motion picture is a feature-length remake of that episode, and it's just not. Yes, Voyager is a lot like Nomad, the probe from The Changeling in many ways, but the stories resolve in very different ways and are ultimately interested in very different things. The Changeling ends with Nomad exploding after Kirk pulls his old talking the computer into destroying itself trick. The motion picture ends with Voyager evolving into a higher life form. Nomad is unable to accept that an imperfect human being was its creator, while Voyager ultimately embraces that fact and joins with Decker in order to incorporate those human imperfections into itself, allowing it to grow beyond the rigid mathematical logic of its programming. There are deeper themes present in The Changeling, but they aren't what the episode is really about. There's an irony in an object humanity invented for a peaceful purpose being returned to it as a dangerous weapon, and Nomad's committing of numerous atrocities in the name of following his programming, or obeying his orders, if you will, raises some dark historical parallels, but mostly the episode is about Captain Kirk finding a way to outsmart this dangerous machine before it kills everybody. The motion picture, on the other hand, invites us to ponder its deeper themes a bit. The story and its characters are more interested in the questions raised by Voyager about identity and from where one derives meaning for one's existence, and the limitations of a worldview rooted only in dry facts with no room for emotion or intuition. It's also a lot more hopeful. The reunion of Voyager and its creator, embodied by Decker, is presented as a wondrous event, an act of creation, an evolutionary leap, whereas the defeat of Nomad is simply the solution to that week's dilemma. I said the motion picture feels like a Star Trek story, and obviously The Changeling is also a Star Trek story, but the motion picture, at its best, is closer to what I think many, if not most of us, want Star Trek to be. Yes, there is a problem to be solved, but the solution lies not in merely outwitting an enemy, but in seeking mutual understanding and in embracing growth and change. Directly opposite, in the Wrong Things Done column, is the fact that for as much as the motion picture feels like a classic Star Trek story, it often feels even more like something else. This is a movie with many sarcastic nicknames. Some folks call it the motionless picture or the slow motion picture because of the aforementioned sluggish pace. I sometimes think of it as Star Trek: A Space Odyssey because of how badly it wants to be 2001. There's nothing wrong with 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's literally nothing wrong with 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's damn near a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's not a very good model for a Star Trek movie. But for whatever reason, the creators of Star Trek the Motion Picture decided to use 2001 for their template. The result is a version of 2001 that's way too silly, or a Star Trek movie that takes itself way too seriously, depending on how you look at it. The slow pacing, which works very well in 2001, is part of the issue, but it's also the tone. There's a graveness, a pervasive humorlessness in the motion picture. Everybody is so stern and so clipped and reserved and ship-shape. I'm not saying the movie should have been a comedy. The characters should take the mission seriously, given the threat represented by Voyager, but where's the personality? Where's the color? Figuratively and literally. I know I said I like the set design, and I do for the most part, but it and the costumes are a little monotone, don't you think? There are a few jokes sprinkled in here and there, mostly from McCoy, but they play as dissonant notes in the midst of everything else, and even McCoy's quips are delivered with an inappropriate level of seriousness. Beyond pacing and tone, there are long stretches where the movie is just flat out aping 2001. Not like that. The endless flyby of the Enterprise when Kirk and Scotty are in the shuttle pod, that's clearly a riff on the famous Blue Danube docking sequence in 2001. The difference is the docking sequence in 2001 is lyrical and musical and tells a little story. It plays like a ballet with spacecraft instead of dancers. The flyby of the Enterprise in the motion picture is just a sadistically extended establishing shot, cutting back and forth between views of the Enterprise in space dock and Kirk and Scotty drooling at it. There's nothing happening. I can't stress enough how much there is nothing happening for several minutes. The various scenes of the Enterprise and Spock in his spacesuit exploring Voyager's ship are clearly patterned after the Stargate sequence in 2001, when astronaut Dave Bowman is being transported through space and time to his final destination. I like the Stargate sequence, and yes, I watch it and enjoy it without any chemical enhancement, but I get that it's not for everybody, and lots of folks might find it dull because it goes on for a while, and truthfully, in terms of plot, there isn't really anything happening other than the character traveling from point A to point B. But the Stargate sequence in 2001 is trying to visualize something truly incredible. In the story, the astronaut is experiencing something that no human has ever experienced, traveling in a way no human has ever traveled, to a place no human has ever been. We see that journey as a rush of colors and patterns and exotic landscapes, and it's surreal and it's abstract, and its goal is to transport you, the viewer, in a way that is analogous to how Dave is being transported. And let's not forget, Dave isn't just sitting there passively as he is taken on this journey. There are quick cuts back to Dave in the pod, and he doesn't look like he's having a great time. He's confused, he's terrified, he's going through it. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, on the other hand, the corresponding scenes are comparatively mundane. The visual effects are beautiful, everything looks great, but if you boil it down to the basics, it's the Enterprise flying past another ship, or Spock flying through the vast interior of that ship. It's the kind of thing we've seen 100 times before in sci-fi movies. It's rarely this visually stunning, but it's nothing groundbreaking or even terribly unusual. It's also entirely literal, nothing surreal, nothing abstract, nothing that seeks to circumvent our logical brains and make us feel without thinking. The most abstract part is Spock's spacewalk through the interior of Voyager's ship, and even there, we have Spock narrating the entire thing and explaining everything he sees. Planets and stars and galaxies float all around him, and he says, "Oh, these must be images of the places Voyager has been." He passes through a tunnel crackling with electricity and says, "I think this is a field coil for a massive imaging system." He approaches the gigantic representation of Ilia and says, "That glowing sensor in her throat must be significant." In 2001, Dave's journey through the Stargate is about evoking wonder and confronting the inexplicable. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, Spock's journey through Voyager is about rendering everything in easy-to-understand terms and explaining it. The motion picture even ends with its version of 2001's Star Child, as Decker and Ilia join together to create a new form of life, a new phase of human evolution. Again, the way this is presented to the audience is very different in each film. In 2001, the Star Child, representing the next evolutionary leap for humanity, is implied by the structure of the narrative itself. The movie begins with proto-humans discovering how to use tools, then cuts ahead to the space age to show more highly evolved modern humans living in space, exploring the moon, traveling to Jupiter, then concludes with the Star Child, the transformed Dave Bowman, contemplating planet Earth from outer space. The movie shows us and allows us to get it. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, Spock just flat out says, "What we've just seen is possibly a next step in our evolution." Thanks, Spock. Appreciate you nailing it down for us, buddy. Trying to do a Star Trek movie in the style of 2001 is probably a mistake no matter what. Doing it in a way that negates the qualities that give 2001 its appeal definitely is. Back over in the Things Done Right column, and this might sound strange given other things I've said, but I'll explain. The characters. Yes, everybody feels flat. Yes, their sobriety feels inappropriate for Star Trek in general and this plot in particular. But once the movie finally gets around to some characterization, it's not bad. Spock's character arc is compelling and ties into Voyager in ways that make both of them more interesting. They share a common theme of self-discovery and self-acceptance, both eventually realizing that those deep existential questions they've been asking cannot be answered through facts and logic alone. Spock's transition from cold, callous detachment when he first arrives aboard the Enterprise to holding Kirk's hand in sickbay and realizing that this human connection is the thing Voyager lacks, to crying for Voyager as they approach the end of Voyager's search for its creator, is some lovely character writing that works in the context of this movie, and works even better if you've seen the TV show and you know about Spock's lifelong struggle to reconcile the Vulcan and human aspects of himself. Decker's story works well too, even if it is a bit of a foregone conclusion. Hey, they wrote out the new guy at the end. Who saw that coming? His romance with Ilia feels a little forced and doesn't have as much time to really live in the story as it needs. Then again, they had all those flybys to fit in and choices had to be made. But Decker's feelings for Ilia compel him to be the one to step up and merge with Voyager, which not only reunites him with the one he loves, or gets him as close to reuniting with her as possible, but also allows Decker to find his place in the universe. For the entire film leading up to this moment, Decker has been displaced. He's been filling spaces that belong to other people, and then he is removed from those spots and left to float. He was the captain of the Enterprise, but then Kirk swept in and took over. He was the science officer because Sonak died, but then Spock arrived and took that as well. He was the odd man out, the one who didn't belong anywhere, until he had the chance to join with Voyager, with Ilia, as he saw it, and do something none of the others could or would do. I like it. It works. One more from the Wrong Things Done column, and this is going to really sound strange given what I just got done saying, but it'll make sense soon, I promise. The characters. Here's my issue. Spock's story and his parallels with Voyager are good. Decker's story is good, but they are really the only characters to have any kind of arc in the movie. Kirk is only the protagonist by default because he's Captain Kirk. He's in charge of the Enterprise. He's giving orders. He's making things happen on the ship. But his choices and his actions don't do all that much to drive the story. The movie isn't about him, but he's treated as the most important character because he's Captain Kirk. McCoy is in the same situation, only worse. He seems like he is only there because Star Trek fans are expecting to see Dr. McCoy. He has nothing to do. He's the guy who stands to the side and reminds the other characters of things. Jim, you're pushing. Your people know their jobs. Decker, that's not your ex-girlfriend. That's an ex-girlfriend-shaped mechanism. Spock, you're dumb. He's still better off than the rest of the supporting cast, who are relegated almost exclusively to expository dialogue. Uhura, Sulu, Scotty, and Chekhov are on hand mostly to declare the current status of the ship out loud or to announce sensor readings, things like that, which, I mean, isn't all that different from how things usually were on the TV show. So I guess you can give the filmmakers points for faithfulness to the source material if that sort of thing is important to you. Thankfully, subsequent films in the series found better and more creative roles for the co-starring crew. I should say the actors do fine here. None of these performances are going to go down in the annals of cinema history, but everybody has clearly shown up to work and they're doing the best they can with the material. The leads, particularly Shatner, are restrained, which actually doesn't work in the movie's favor, but it seems clear to me that their performances are as controlled as they are because that's what the script and the director demands of them. One last item for the Things Done Right column, the score by Jerry Goldsmith. The main title theme is so iconic it was repurposed as the main title theme for Star Trek The Next Generation. The Klingon theme was an instant classic and imparted to the Klingons an exotic and intriguing quality they never had on the TV show. And the love theme, which is used during the overture and also to represent the romance between Ilia and Decker, is sweeping and beautiful, and if you give yourself over to it, it'll have your heart in your throat by the time it's over. Just wonderful. Beyond the prominent themes, though, Goldsmith's score is extraordinary for the amount of heavy lifting it's doing throughout the film. That fucking death march, when Kirk and Scotty are flying over to the Enterprise for the first time, the only thing that makes it even somewhat watchable is Goldsmith's score. Ditto for the similarly excessive flyby scenes inside Voyager. Goldsmith's music elevates the best parts of the film, adding a layer of grandeur and mystery and a much-needed sense of adventure, and it makes the worst parts of the film bearable. It's a fantastic piece of work. And it's new. It doesn't just rework familiar cues from the TV show, it's a score for this movie. Not a nostalgic rearrangement of Star Trek's greatest hits. That trend would continue throughout the classic Trek film series, with James Horner, Leonard Rosenman, and Cliff Idleman building scores for subsequent Star Trek movies around their own original themes. Like other films that have lived in popular culture far beyond their initial release, Star Trek the Motion Picture has been reevaluated over the years, and though it was once widely considered one of the low points of the classic Trek film series, there are now those who hold it up as one of their favorites. When I posted on social media last week that I was re-watching it to prepare for this video, many people replied that the motion picture was their very favorite Star Trek movie. I wish those people all the happiness in the world, and I hope they get the help they need. The director's edition, which was originally released on home video in 2001, is an improvement over the theatrical cut. It's a few minutes longer, but individual scenes are tightened up, some improved special effects are added, some key moments that were left out of the theatrical cut are inserted, including Spock crying for Voyager. And overall, I do think the director's edition works better, but not that much better. It's still a tedious fucking film. So, is Star Trek the Motion Picture actually a good movie? I don't think so. Ultimately, for me, there's no getting around what a slog it is to watch. But that doesn't mean it's without value. Parts of it are good, even great. It's visually stunning, the score is incredible, and even though it does itself no favors by pretending to be 2001: A Space Odyssey, at its heart, its story is Star Trek through and through. And it's still not even close to the worst Star Trek film. Hello, Star Trek Generations. Hello, Star Trek Nemesis. Most importantly of all, without this movie, we wouldn't have Star Trek II and the rest of the classic Trek film series. We wouldn't have Star Trek The Next Generation or any of the films or series that followed it. We wouldn't have the Star Trek franchise with all its ups and downs as we know it and love it today. Regardless of our opinions on the quality of the movie itself, this was the big comeback. And even though it was disappointing, it succeeded in reviving the franchise. It's because of the motion picture that Star Trek has lived so long and prospered. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to let you know what the subject of the next Trek Actually video is going to be, but before I do that, I want to give shoutouts to some of my newest Patreon patrons and channel members. First, the new patrons. They are Cross Trekkie, thanks Cross Trekkie. Nomadic Synth, thanks Nomadic Synth. Ron Brown, thanks Ron. Brad Jenkins, thanks Brad. Mario Vilas, thanks Mario. John Daw, thanks John. Gothdammit J, thanks Gothdammit J. Bishop to Crows Level 3, thanks Bishop to Crows Level 3. And now, the new channel members. They are Jenny Duncan 63, thanks Jenny. Morgan PW9TB, thanks Morgan. Robert Anderson YW1SZ, thanks Robert. Dr. Sick of You, thanks Dr. Sick of You. Dave Elwood 1351, thanks Dave. Carbide 6, thanks Carbide 6. If you want to support this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives or clicking the join button to become a member of this channel. All patrons and members get access to exclusive posts that allow you to vote in the polls that determine upcoming Trek Actually topics and also submit questions ahead of time for my twice monthly Ask Away live streams. If you pledge $5 a month or more on Patreon, or become a member at the $5 a month tier or higher, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. If you'd rather give a one-time gift than a recurring monthly contribution, you're always more than welcome to do that by clicking the thanks button right below the video or via PayPal or Venmo. The links for those are in the video description. Many thanks. If you like what I do on YouTube, especially the Star Trek related stuff, you should also check out my side projects, The Ensign's Log, the Star Trek-themed comedy podcast that I'm on alongside Jason Harding and Amanda Billings, and Trek Reluctantly, the watch-along stream Dana Cole and I do every Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel right here. As always, links in the description. Now, for next month's Regulation Trek Actually topic, I must say, you all have pleasantly surprised me. The majority of those of you patrons and members who voted in the poll, that is, but, I'm sure the rest of you are fine too. The winning topic has been in the poll once or twice before, but it's never won, and I wasn't expecting it to win this time either, but it did. It's a topic I've wanted to do for a while, one that takes a look at some of the many environmentalist messages found in the Star Trek franchise over the years. That topic is why Star Trek actually keeps destroying planets. Would have been a better topic for this month, since this video is actually being published on Earth Day. But hey, I didn't list it as an option in the poll for this one, which I guess makes it my fault. Rest assured though, in here, I'm still blaming all of you. That started out positive and went downhill fast, didn't it? Anyway, that's next month. I'll be back then and a bunch of times before then, so until the next time you see me, whenever that is, thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.